All right, so let's create a template. I'm going to go to File, New Level. Let's start one with the default, just because it's already going to have a couple things there that we can use, so why not? Okay. So things that we don't need, that's just going to obscure our view, is we don't need anything like the fogs here, right? The atmosphere fog, we can get rid of that. Directional sun, we don't actually need to have a sun here. We'll use point lights. So yeah, I'll delete it, get rid of it. I have a reflection cube. You know what? We'll keep that for our assets. Skylights, we'll keep that. And your sky sphere. So the sky sphere we'll keep. So let's start creating a material. Now I'm going to create a material for the background and basically to look at it so it's a nice clear background. And it has a nice gradient. So to do that, I'll create a material. I'll name it background. So m_background. I'll double click on it. And I'm going to create a gradient. A linear gradient, and we'll use vertical, right? Now here's the thing, is that this will always go by your UV spaces. I want to apply it so no matter what direction I look, I'm going to see a gradient, right? So one way I can do that is I could use a special modifier that is screen resolution or screen position, UVs. So I could use UVs based on the screen position. So if I use viewport UVs and drag that in there, I can plug that in, or V at least for vertical, right into emissive. Because I kind of want it to look like a sky, so I want it to somewhat glow. I'll hit apply. And we could just do a quick test to see if this is working the way we hope. If I drag it on, nothing happens. Now why doesn't anything happen? Well, that's because technically the sky sphere isn't a model. It isn't a 3D model. It's actually a whole blueprint on itself, right? So it's not an actual model that you can just throw on a material onto. So let's get rid of it, and let's get a model that we can do this to, right? So what we can do is that we can go to Create tab, Shapes. I can get a sphere, and I can throw it on the sphere right here, just like that. Let me make it much bigger. So I'll press R, scale up. So now you can see when it's the size of the screen, even when I move it up and down, it stays still. Now problem is that when I'm inside, it's no longer there. And I can't see anything because I'm inside it now. So one way I can actually fix that is just make sure that this is set to double-sided. Now, FYI, because this is a 3D mesh and this is a sphere, it also means that there are going to be things like collision, right? So you could actually override collision. And that's just going to avoid problems like if you try to press play right now, it might not work, or at least not well, because my character is inside the ball, but the ball has collision. So if I select on the sphere, I can go here to collision. I can type collision. And under presets, under default, let me set it to no collision. Press play. And there we go. Now I'm inside the sphere. And you can see no matter what direction I look, the gradient kind of stays in place, which is really nice. And here's the coolest thing, is that because it's all based on camera or viewport UVs, if I drag this onto the ground, let me drag it onto the viewport. Oh, there we go, compiled. But now you can see if I press G, everything's pretty much hidden. All right, now, what else do I want to do here? Well, I have my sphere. I can make that bigger. So let me make that bigger. Much better. Now it's even hard to even see inside here because I'm moving and nothing looks like it's moving with it. But it's there. But let's make it better. One last thing that I want to do to the sky sphere to really customize it is I want to take this and I want to create a lerp. So if I hold down L, left click, so just a reminder, lerp is like your blend. And if I put this into the alpha, I can now use two colors. So hold down V, left click, hold down V and left click. I'll name this one color 01, copy, and I'll name this one color 02. And I'll just make sure that this one's set to white. This is just going to be the default colors. We can obviously change it afterwards. So color 1, color 2, plug that into emissive color, hit apply, and now we basically apply it with instances. So if I right click, create material instance, throw it onto the ground, onto the sphere, open it up, click on the color here, and now you can see I can change the color. And as long as everything is set to the same material ID, it'll set it to everything. Make it darker, brighter. A couple things we want to change is things like the emissive, not the emissive, but the exposure. You can see when I change it, it kind of changes my whole scene for a second. I let go and it slowly adapts. Like that. So basically we'll also have to change kind of the camera settings later on. But at least the good thing is that I can really customize this and stylize it just to how I want. Alright, so I'll set it to that for now. You can see even when I set it dark, it brightens up this whole scene. So that's something we'll just have to deal with until we fix it. But now we have a background that's consistent and it's good for showing off. Right, we have skylight here. And I don't think skylight is something that's important that we need to have. Well, we'll keep it on just for the assets. But speaking of assets, let's create one. I'm going to go here into my, my folder. I'm going to right click. I'm going to create a blueprint class. And I'm going to click on actor. I'm going to call it BP for blueprint underscore display. Double click on it. I'm just going to use a default asset. Obviously, I don't have assets here really prepared for this. So I'll just use the starter content stuff just as a template. And I'll use something like a chair. I'll drag that on. Right, make sure it's set at 0, 0, 0, and it is. Perfect. There's my chair. Hit compile. Now, that should allow me to have my chair right here. All right. I don't know where we are in the scene, but we're somewhere here. Okay. Let me look higher. There we go. I can also hide the sphere for a second, just so I can see the ground. There we go. There we go. Move it up. There we go. Great. FYI, if it's ever floating, you could press the End key on your keyboard, END, and it'll automatically align. Okay, so now we have that. If I turn on my backgrounds, you can see that the one thing that's really cool about the Unreal Engine is that it absorbs everything around it, so it really calculates lighting realistically, which is great. Obviously, it's a little bit too dark for our liking, so if I hold down L and left click, I can create a light source. I'll remove this search, and under lighting, I'll just set this to something low, like 1, just for now. Right, and I'll make sure to set this to movable, so it's a real-time light. Okay, perfect. Now, under display, I'm going to try to make this as convenient as possible for everybody. So realistically, you would still have to go into this asset. You'll have to use sequencer. You would have to tie it and then animate it, right, to actually make the video. But let's actually make it even easier than that. Let's make it so you only have to do things one time and you'll never have to do it again for any other asset. So if I open this up, I'm going to go here to event script. So event basically means when the game is playing, and construction means before the game is built. before the game is built or running, and when the game is running. So under event script, I can go to something like tick, which is basically every time a frame gets rendered. So every time a frame gets drawn, this happens, a tick happens. So what I can do is I can take this chair, drag it on, and I can drag out a connection and type rotate. And there's different rotates that we can use. So here it is add relative rotation. So I'll click on that. And what I can do here is I could tell it for every tick to initiate this and to rotate just a little bit. Relative means that it's going to be within its local space and not the world space. So if I right click on this little input, I can click split, and I can make all of these parameters different. And I do want to rotate it on the Z, right? The Z is going to rotate the way we want to. So if I drag out a connection, I can promote to a variable. And that variable, I'll name speed. I'll hit instance editable, which means that it makes it active here, and I can actually change the parameter over here. And I'll just set the default value to 1. So it's just a small rotation. But the idea is that every time this ticks, it'll give 1 rotation. And for 60 ticks, then it'll do 60 degrees of rotation. So that's how that will work. Now, let's see if it works. Press play. And there we go. It's rotating. Now, we're not done making it easy. One thing that we can do is that, what happens if I want to change the prop? Well, if I want to change the prop, then I need to re-engineer this whole parameter. So what I can do is under construction, so before this even gets built, obviously before it gets built, I decide what kind of prop it's going to be. So it's construction script. I can take this asset, because I'm going to reference it. I'm basically saying I want to do something with this. Drag it out, and I can type static, and I'll click on set static mesh. So what this allows me to do is it allows me to replace this target with a new mesh. And that new mesh, instead of selecting a new mesh, I'll drag out and create a parameter, promote to variable, and I'll name it display mesh. I'll click on instance editable and compile. Okay, let's do a quick test. This should allow me to not see anything anymore. Why? Because there's no default, and right now something needs to be loaded. So let me actually just fix that. Let me select on this and create a default. Right, so let me go here, props. I'll use the chair as a default. If I hit compile, I should be able to see it. So before compile, perfect. Perfect. So what that should allow me to do now, guys, is that if I make a copy, hold down Alt, copy, I should be able to drag this over, or like a chair, or anything, right onto that, and be able to use that. Right, now the only thing actually, it's working pretty well. Yeah. You know what? Press play. Yep, that works. I was afraid I was going to sample the wrong material, but no. As long as your material is put on the mesh, it would work. So, there we go. And now, the easy parts, the stuff that you guys already did. Just make a video. So at this point, what we could do is I can make a video sequence. So I'm going to right click, go into animation, level sequence. I'll type video or movie. Double click on it. Create a camera. And it'll place me inside that camera. And style it up. Like that. So I definitely want to make sure it's sharp. So right now it doesn't seem too sharp. So I'll readjust these parameters. So sharpen that up. Okay, perfect. Now here's the good thing about doing this in a blueprint. I don't actually have to animate anything here. It would actually turn when I press play because it's doing a blueprint. So realistically, what I could do at this point is that I can increase this. Because I know it's going to do one tick every frame, maybe it'll be smart if I set this to 360, the endpoint. Just like that, so I know that it'll do a 360, and it'll take about 5 to 6 seconds. So let me also create some tracks. I'll use a fade track. I'll set that to 1. Click on that. And I'll set that to 0. I'll hold down Alt, drag that, and move it here, so it makes a copy. So holding down Alt and drag makes a copy of your keyframes. And I'll set this to be at least 30 frames off from the turn off point. So now we should fade in. It would spin because of the blueprint. So you can't see it here, so that's one thing you just got to remember. And we do have parameters on the camera. One thing I do like about this, and even inside Unreal 4, you can go onto the camera and change the post-processing effects. Right? So I can change elements about the post-processing that I want to. What would I change? First, it would definitely be the exposure. So with the exposure, I'll make sure to set a min and max, maybe of 1 and 1. There we go. I can go here to exposure and just increase that to offset it, right? And this way I can fully control on how I want it to display. If you want your scene brighter, if you want it not as bright, you can change that. 3.5. Yeah, I think 3.5 is good. There we go. Now, obviously, because it's post-processing, you do have a lot of options on what you can use. For example, bloom. Maybe I'll change bloom. I'll change it to convolution. And that'll make it a little bit brighter, so I can increase the intensity. So you can see the little glow happening there now. You have more parameters you have. I believe it's under advanced, right through here. Nope. Okay, that increases the intensity. Not too much. Okay. Pretty good. Another one we can change is vignetting. So I can increase that. Cool. So one thing that I like about this is that because the whole scene adapts, if I go to the instance, I can always decide what background I want at this point, and it's easily changeable. And it even would bounce onto your asset, so it does make it feel more realistic. You can increase the brightness. You can really customize it that way. I'll make it a little bit light blue. Not too blue. Perfect. Oh, wanted a little bit more blue than that. Okay. Okay. Now it takes a little bit of time to kind of nail these parameters, right? Let me inject out of camera so I don't screw that up. And let me play around with the light settings here. The light won't move, right? So the shadows will update. So that's one thing to point out. FYI, it won't look good until you jump back into the camera. So don't forget about that. All your settings is saved inside this camera. Right, so you have to jump inside the camera, and there we go, right? And I can kind of play around with these light settings here. Cool. I can make it a little bit blue to even match. I'll make one a little bit stronger on one side. And one a little bit weaker. All right. And maybe another one in the back, like that. Who needs marmoset, right? Come on. Who needs marmoset? All right, cool. Now, that should be pretty good. I think we should have everything working now. Let's do a quick test. Let's do a render test. All right, under rendering, I'm going to make sure that I have custom frames on. It depends on how you want to render it, of course. Making the video is up to you, but usually I prefer 60 frames so it looks like a real game animation. So it's nice and smooth. You know, it doesn't have to be that big. I'll set mine to 1080p. I'll set my outputs. I won't use compression, just because the compression on Unreal really does suck, and it will make your files look bad. Use the Adobe Media Encoder for sure. Okay. Capture. You know what? Before I do that, let me cancel. Let me just click on Save All, because it could break, right? It could break. Display level. Template world, hit save. Perfect. Okay. Actually, one last thing I want to do, and this is going to be under the camera settings. So one final thing, and this is just if you want to make it look as glorious as possible. Make sure that your screen space reflections is set to 100%. In fact, can it even go higher? I think it's only 100. Yeah, only 100. Quality, I'll set it to 100 as well. There's some settings under post-processing that you can take a look at to improve for sure. But the number one thing is change the percentage, the render percentage, to more. So I'll set that to, say, 150. And that will help with anti-aliasing and make things looking a little bit sharper. Unreal 5 is a little bit higher demand, so if you put it too high, it could crash your computer, so just FYI. Everything looks good. Capture. Hit save. I think what's also nice about doing an effect like this is because, in a way, it's a little bit more accomplished. You know, you customize it from the ground up, and basically you made it yourself. So in a way, when people look at this and they say, "Whoa, what did you render it in? Or did you use Marmoset?" You say, "No, I made it myself in Unreal." And it's a little bit more meaningful that way. And the fact that you can customize it, even if everyone watches the exact same tutorials, everyone will decide a different position to put their lighting. Everyone will decide, you know, what kind of background to use. Maybe a specific background color will look better. Like maybe if I was showing off foliage, I would probably want to use the green color, right? The only reason I probably picked blue is because blue and yellow do contrast pretty nicely. And of course, metal looks really nice in blue. Okay, that is good. Now I'm going to do a little quick preview. Looks good. Great. So now, media encoder should be super simple. Drag and drop. Drag and drop, use the default templates. Right, so H265 is usually what I recommend. Match source, perfect. Click on that. Everything here is fine. Render at maximum depth, maximum quality there. Everything here looks fine. Quality I'll set to highest. Bit rates I'll set to 20. Actually, I could be confused with 4K because this is not 4K right now. So I think with 1080p it'll be 15. With 4K it'll be like 25 to 40. Okay. I think everything here looks good. Maximum render quality. And press OK. And press play. And you can see it renders pretty quickly because we're not adding effects in, we're not really changing anything, we're just compressing. And compression doesn't take as long as compressing with other graphics and stuff. That's done. It's about 20 megs, which definitely doesn't need to be that large, so we could even optimize it even further. Probably just use the defaults and it would be fine for sure. And here we go. Perfect. Might have to adjust some things like the focus, making sure that nothing gets a little blurred out when it rotates, but otherwise it's great. And guess what? Guess what? Your job would be just as easy to do this now. You can go to a brand new asset that you have in your mesh, in your files. Right, so let me do this beautiful rock and replace this together. So replace this. There's the rock. I might have to do something like downscale, so FYI. Things might be different sizes. Right, and now capture again. Save selected. And it'll capture that. So it actually, believe it or not, if you do it this way, you spend a little bit more time setting it up. But once it's set up, you would save an endless amount of time in the future, right? Because even with people with Marmoset, customizing it, every single video they'll have to customize, right? It won't be as easy as throwing in a template. And people always wonder how you did it in a way perfectly, right? Because they're all matching one another. You know what? I might have ran out of room. I did. I ran out of room. So this is probably going to crash. Okay. Well, this is most likely going to crash. Luckily, I did save, so it's still good. But that's essentially everything. That's essentially everything. I think with that information, you should be able to easily create your own templates and make 360 videos. If you guys have any questions, just let me know.